Okay, it's 3:05, so I'm going to get started. So I'd like to welcome you all here today for the Hofstra University Museum of Art Second Fridays program. And today we're going to be looking at photographs by Berenice Abbott. Okay. Please leave your microphone on mute until the end. There will be plenty of time for questions and answers after the presentation, and you can always make comments in the chat box if you have comments or questions. So as many of you know, because I recognize many of these names and faces as people who have attended before, the museum galleries remain temporarily closed. And so we're continuing this virtual program of Second Fridays, where we focus on a different aspect of our permanent collection. So as the permanent collection has more than 5,000 works of art that have a broad range in scope, from American and European works, for African, Asian, Melanesian, Central and South American artifacts, date range up to from 1500 BC to the 21st century. About 1,500 of the works are available on our online database on our website. So this week we're going to talk about Berenice Abbott, photographer. We have about 950 photographs in the collection. That's about 18% of the collection. And 9 of the photographs are by Berenice Abbott. So Berenice Abbott was one of the most most independent and respected photographers of the 20th century. She was born in 1898 in Ohio, and she briefly attended Ohio State University before moving to New York City in 1919. In the city, she joined several friends associated with the Provincetown Players Group in Greenwich Village, and she worked with small parts and plays and did modeling to support herself. Photography wasn't even on her mind at the time. She wanted to be a sculptor. She also worked as a model and posed for photographers Man Ray and Nicholas Murray, and she became very close friends with Man Ray, who later introduced her to photography. So like a lot of American artists and writers at the time, she decided to move to Europe. She saved up for a one-way ticket and sailed to Paris in 1921, excuse me. She continued studying sculpture in Paris and Berlin, supporting herself by doing odd jobs. By this time, Man Ray in 1923 had moved to Paris, and he hired her to be his darkroom assistant, introducing her to photography. So in the darkroom, she learned the technical side of photography, and she discovered she had a really great aptitude for it and was very interested in it. So after a couple years of working as Man Ray's darkroom assistant, she, in 1926, she opened her own portrait studio in Paris. And it also had her first single artist exhibit in Paris. So she made portraits of a number of people associated with the avant-garde art movements of the day, like film director Jean Cocteau, artist Max Ernst, poet and the St. Vincent Millay. And these are just a couple examples of our early portraits. These are not in our collection, just to be clear. But on the left is a portrait of Jean Cocteau's hands. And on the right is French photographer Eugène Auger. And this was very important. She took his portrait. She was very enamored of his photography. And she took his portrait right before he passed away in 1927. So Auger had captured the streets of Paris for more than 30 years. And he created an encyclopedic but idiosyncratic portrait of Paris entering the modern era. So at the turn of the century in Paris, the city's urban landscape was changing and being reshaped by a modernization campaign that was changing the nature of old Paris with its narrow medieval streets to a modern Paris with wide avenues and public parks. So after Auger died in 1927, Abbott negotiated the purchase of his work, 1,500 glass plate negatives, not the same type of film we use now, and 8,000 prints. She was determined to make his work more well known. And when she returned to New York in 1929, she took all of his work with her. So these are a couple examples. We do not have Auger prints in our collection. These are a couple of examples of Auger's prints of Paris from around 1898 to he continued photographing till his death in 1927. So this is just to give you an example of what Auger was doing. So when Berenice Abbott returns to New York in 1929, she began her decade-long documentation of New York City under construction with aerial views and cityscapes that would ultimately be her best-known work, a series called Changing New York. She was captivated by the city and wanted to document it as Atget had done with Paris. And at this time, there was a lot of changes happening in New York from the 8 years that she had been away till the time she came back. She was very amazed at the architecture of the city and how much of the new city was in progress. And she really wanted to document every aspect of the city, often capturing it from higher vantage points. So she was often carrying her large format camera upstairs and across rooftops in order to capture the angle that she wanted. So in 1934, the Museum of the City of New York gave her a single artist exhibition. And this exhibition led to her working with the Federal Art Project, which was a division of the Works Progress Administration, the WPA, to hire her to create the Changing New York project. So with their funding, she photographed New York from 1935 to 1938. And Abbott herself said of this, "Old New York is fast disappearing. At almost any point on Manhattan Island, the sweep of one's vision can take in the dramatic contrasts of the old and the new, and the bold foreshadowing of the future. This dynamic quality should be caught and recorded immediately in a documentary interpretation of New York City. The city is in the making, and unless this transition is crystallized now in permanent form, it will be forever lost. The camera alone can catch the swift surfaces of the cities today and speak a language intelligible to all." So she really, had to make a proposal to the Federal Art Project to do this work. So this was something that she was very much a passion for her. And she traveled all across the 5 boroughs. It wasn't, most of the photographs, I think, tend to be Manhattan, but she traveled all across the 5 boroughs and photographed skyscrapers and storefronts and railway stations and bridges and the elevated track running down 3rd Avenue. And a lot of these images still kind of define the way we see the city today. They're become very iconic images of New York City. She also took photos of the quaint shop interior that maybe had changed for, 50 years, and contrasted that with the modern structure of things like the Manhattan Bridge or the stately homes on 5th Avenue. So it really was a sweeping view of New York, and gave, equal weight to things that, of everything was treated equally. So this is one of the photographs in our collection now. This is the downtown skyport at Pier 11 East. Now this is down at South Street Seaport area. It's currently where the ferries and excursion boats leave from now. So I think at the time it was, obviously you can see the seaplanes, and with a small airplane takeoff. So, but again, she's capturing these kind of unique aspects of the city where you have in the kind of middle ground there the older you know, brick townhouses, tenement kind of buildings, and then the skyscrapers rising behind them. So she's trying to capture all these different contrasts and how New York is changing. And that was really the dynamic of the city was really what she was trying to capture. So this one is called the Poultry Shop on East 7th Street. And this is, again, just a real iconic image of New York City, that when you think about New York City. I love this rooster sign above the poultry shop. It's just wonderful. And that it's a neon sign that's got this kind of metal cage around it, so probably to prevent some damage to it. But also the apartment building with the fire escapes all the way down the side of the building. I mean, that's a very kind of New York, image, I think, for most people. So this is from 1937. So this is, very, very typical of the type of neighborhood signage and neighborhood atmosphere she was trying to capture. And this one is called Advertisements. It's a billboard. I don't have a location on this. Would be curious to know exactly where this location is, but it's a combination of product advertisement, but also advertisements for plays and shows. There's an advertisement for the Roxy Theater, and there's an advertisement for Madison Square Garden. So it was really, trying to capture the feeling of the time. I think that. So this whole series called Changing New York was published as a book in 1939. She chose 97 of her almost 700 negatives and only chose 97 of them for the publication. There are other later editions published. This happens to be one from 1999. But so the original publication was a real bestseller. I mean, it really was something that was very successful. And these images of New York City kind of became the images that she's known for. But she kind of stopped taking these images in 1939. So there's a lot more to her work than this. But this is the kind of the first part of her photography career that this is what she's really known for. As I had mentioned, she had a portrait studio when she was in Paris. And one of the things when she came to New York was she continued to have a portrait studio downtown. And she continued to take commissions to photograph people. And it was one of her sources of income. This is from 1936. This is just called East Side Portrait. We don't have a person's name for this particular portrait, but it's a very straightforward portrait. He's right in front of us, up front and center. And it's the person that she's focusing on here. There's not a lot of, there's not a lot in the background or a lot of activity about the image. And then as compared to this portrait, which is a portrait of Edward Hopper. I'm not sure who's familiar with Edward Hopper, but he is a realist painter who created drama out of commonplace subjects. One of his most famous paintings is called Nighthawks. It's the image of the downtown diner late at night with the patrons are viewed through the large windows and there's light coming through the diner onto the street. I should have put an image in here, but that's one of his images that he's really well known for. But it's very interesting to me in this portrait of Edward Hopper, there's no indication that he's a painter in this portrait. There's no indication of much about him. And it's also pulled back from him as you compare it to the other portrait we saw, which was kind of, sitting at a table and he was from the chest to his head, and the person filled up the image. Whereas this one, she's pulled the camera back and she's showing him in this room, but the room it's not like it's his painting studio or showing his home, that, you're seeing things like, like you would see what books he was, had, or paintings on the wall, or anything to give you clues about him. I think it's a very interesting portrait because of that. It's kind of a little bit different. And then it looks like there's a hat hanging on that pole in the background. I'm not quite sure what that's about. It's kind of an interesting portrait. So she did partially supported herself by continuing to do commission portraits. That was one of her income sources. Okay. And then she also did another series. This is in 1954. She set off from New York and drove down all the way on US Route 1 down to Key West, and then retraced her route north all the way up to Fort Kent, Maine. And along the way, she took over 2,400 negatives and spent the next 2 years making prints from those negatives. So it was about this whole journey along the East Coast. And again, she says about this trip that she wanted to capture visually the character of a historic section of the United States, its beauties and incongruities, and all. If visible evidence of the past survived, we want to photograph them before bulldozers and derricks moved in. So this is in 1954, and she's taking pictures all up and down the East Coast. The same idea that she did with Changing New York was realizing that, things are changing in the US, and there's a lot of development and a lot of building up, and trying to capture what it was in the past. So in between these other projects, she made a living cobbled together a number of different types of jobs. She was taught at the New School in New York. She did a lot of work for magazines. She did the portrait commissions, as I mentioned, and she sold her prints. She also published a book called A Guide for Better Photography, which was aimed at amateurs in 1941. So it was considered a classic, and it's not only a guide to the technical aspects of photography, but it also included essays about photography. It was extremely successful book, and it was reprinted up through the mid-1950s. So she was very interested always in the technical aspects of photography. And in the 1940s and 50s, she started to shift her focus to science, which is a subject that fascinated her, and she felt a lot of ordinary people didn't understand. And she thought that she could really help people understand through her photography. So she began experimenting in the studio with images to illustrate scientific principles. And she invented new photographic techniques in order to do this. She even set up her own company, House of Photography, for which she designed innovations and sold them. She held 4 different patents for photographic-related equipment, including a process called supersight process, which made direct photographs on 16 by 20 each negatives that created virtually grainless and really highly detailed images. So she used these techniques and equipment to shoot images of magnetic fields, soap bubbles, penicillin developing in a petri dish. So she was very much interested in trying to capture some of these scientific, or the natural world and scientific principles. So then in 1958, the Physical Science Study Committee, which is based at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, was tasked with creating a new series of textbooks, including a high school physics book. And Abbott was appointed the project photographer. So she really loved this, and she spent a couple years working on the project, And the project was it ended in 1960, and she was really heartbroken that it had ended. But her photography for this physics textbook really created a new standard for textbooks and photography. The images were rendered poetically with our artistic eye, but they illustrated the scientific principles specifically, and they really reveal a real interplay between abstraction and reality. So she worked at MIT for a couple years and did these photographs that were always intended to illustrate a physics textbook. So this one is called Falling Balls of Unequal Mass. Now the principle that she's illustrating, and it's a very long and narrow photograph. So I tried to get it as big as I could, but it's kind of hard to see. So it's that when you drop two balls that are different masses and weights, if they're dropped from the same height, they will reach the ground at the same time. So she created a way of taking these photographs, so quickly, as the balls dropped, she captured, so split seconds of taking these photographs and then putting them all together in one image so that to illustrate the point. And they're very, as photographic prints, they're really beautifully, they have a really, really velvety black darkness to them. And the balls and the elements that she's showing are very bright. And I think it loses a little bit in the digital image that I have for you, but they're very sharp and they're very, they are almost abstract photographs. If you didn't know that she was trying to illustrate a scientific principle for you, I don't know that you would know that that's what it was. So let's see. So this is another one called the pendulum, the small arc. So there's a set point at the very. This is a very narrow photograph. This whole photograph is less than 5 inches wide. So so it's almost 2 feet tall, but it's 5 inches wide. So at the top you have the single point where the ball is attached on its string, and then she sets the pendulum to swing. So she's showing at the very bottom, you can see the arc of the balls from that pendulum and how that's created. And this one is called magnetic field. So this one is the magnetic field is the area around the magnet where the magnet is having an impact on, like, the metal filings or whatever is on there. So, and this is, a really interesting photograph because if you didn't know that she was doing magnetic field, you would think it was an abstract work. You wouldn't necessarily know that it was of something and that it was illustrating a point. So so these photographs that I showed you from Changing New York through the magnetic field are part of our collection here at Hofstra. And they are, could you hold on for 1 second, please? Sorry, I had somebody come in. These are photographs that were taken from the 1930s up to this is 1961. But if you'll notice on the thing, I say that they're from the portfolio retrospective in 1982. Berenice Abbott often reprinted her photographs as a group later. So she would take the earlier negatives and she would print them later. So the negative is from, in this case, 1958 to 61, but this particular print that we have was printed in 1982. It's not uncommon for photographers to do this. They are signed and they have an edition. I believe this is an edition of 40, and I think ours is 18 out of 40. This portfolio retrospective actually includes 50 images. We only have 9 of them. We don't have the whole portfolio. These are also, her earlier photographs would have been printed in a smaller format, like a regular 8x10, like a regular gelatin silver print. These are, because they were printed in the 80s, they're actually printed much larger. So these are really, you know, they're around 18x24, each of them. So in the earlier part of the 20th century, a photographer wouldn't necessarily print a photograph that big. Just there's a lot of technical reasons why they wouldn't be able to do it. But as, you know, through the 20th century, as technology developed, a lot of things with photography and with printmaking allowed you to scale up the size. So that's part of what, so she chose these, which ones she wanted to include in the portfolio, and she was printed them, and there's, as I said, they're signed by her and everything. So they're printed later, but they're still of value to us. So the other thing I wanted to mention was that I had mentioned Eugene Atget at the beginning. So Abbott continued with her mission to try to get his work cared for and promoting his work and shown. And in 1968, she was able to sell Atget's work to the Museum of Modern Art. So it was saved. And that was one of the things that she was really concerned about, almost sometime to the detriment of promoting herself. She really wanted to save his work and his legacy. She also published the first book about him and made sure that his work was in a lot of different exhibitions. So one of the things that happened because she was caring for his work this way is oftentimes Atget and Abbott are put together a lot. So whether that's a fair comparison or not, but they often get put together. And in the later part in the 1950s, she moved to Maine, that's where she stayed for the rest of her life. And she also produced a book called The Portrait of Maine, which are photographs of Maine. In 1970, she finally had her own solo exhibition at the Museum of Modern Art in the city. And, you know, she was, did get her due later in life. She died in 1991. So she lived a long time. And I think that she talked about wanting to represent the century. And she really I think she really fulfilled that ambition. And she really forged her own career as a woman and a photographer. And it was not always easy. And I think that, you know, she cobbled together a lot of different things to make it work for herself. And she saw a lot of change in photography during her lifetime. So I think she's one of the most interesting photographers. And there's a couple places, if you're interested in more specific information about her or other images, the Art Story has a section on her. The International Center for Photography has a section on her, and the Museum of Modern Art obviously has information on her also. So now I'm happy to answer any questions or respond to any comments that anybody might have.
We have a couple of comments from earlier on when you had the slide of Hopper up. Carla had commented that he lived on Washington Square, and Susan observed she thought he was a sculptor from the picture, the way it was laid out. Ira offered up that the falling balls image documents Galileo's principle of falling bodies. And then Carla had a question, what subjects did she photograph after 1961?
After the kind of the scientific photographs, she continued to photograph a lot of nature. There was a lot of, what do I want to say? Kind of flora and fauna, and she photographed wherever she was, and she moved to Maine, so she photographed a lot of Maine at that time. And she did do a book that she published from her Maine photographs. And while she continued to photograph, her work from Changing New York was always the most desired. So she often she would often be doing prints or exhibitions of the work from Changing New York, because that's the body of work that was her, you know, as far as it was successful as an artist, yes, but also successful as far as sales and things like that. So, anybody else have any other questions or comments? If you know how to raise your hand, you could do that. I don't know. Okay. Barbara Stone, if you want to unmute yourself. Oh. You want to go ahead, Barbara? You should be good, Barbara. You ready? No? She raised her hand and she's unmuted. Oh, I don't know. Anybody else? No? No, I could not hear you, Barbara.
Yeah, sorry. She said could you not hear me? So
no, I couldn't hear her. Yeah. You want to type it in, Barbara, since we're having a sound problem? I'm not sure what happened there. Because I have her as unmuted, but it's not, I can't hear her. Anyone else? Any questions? No question. Not a lot of questions and comments today.
Do you know anything about Lazarus Wiener, the person who gifted these?
Not specifically, no. A lot of times our files, especially when they are older files, they don't tell us a whole lot about certain people. Still, that's who it was, but I don't have any information about him. All right. Well, I'm gonna move on to just let you know that our next second Friday is April 9th, and we're going to be talking about painter Yonya Fain. He is he was a Hofstra faculty member. He was also a Holocaust survivor, and he considered himself a witness to history, and a lot of his work deals with things, you know, from his life experience. We did an exhibition of his work in 2012, I believe. So I'm going to talk about Yonya. So
do you record any of these lectures?
Yes, they all get recorded and they are on our website.
Are they real? Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Because,
it sometimes takes us, it can take you know, like a week or so before they get posted, but.
All right, because sometimes the 2 o'clock lecture runs a little long and we miss the beginning of the 3 o'clock lecture.
Oh.
Our lives are so complicated, you can't believe. You know?
Ours are always, yeah.
Sitting in one place all day watching Zoom programs.
But at least it's keeping you mentally engaged.
That's the whole idea, is to learn something new every day and keep us from vegetating. This was very interesting, but I did miss the very beginning.
Yeah.
Okay, so we can get on to your...
Yes, it's, actually, I think it's my next slide. Hold on. Hofstra.edu/museum. And on our virtual museum page, we have all the lists of all the programs that we've recorded. Going back actually almost a year ago now that we started doing virtual programs. So they're all on there. Yeah.
Fantastic.
So,
Thank
yeah.
you.
You're welcome. But it does take us probably a week or so to get them up. But yeah.
Karen, just,
Yep.
I don't know if you saw, Barbara had typed in, she saw an exhibit a few years ago of Abbott and another photographer whose name she didn't recall. He photographed the same scenes that she did, but many, many years later, and that it was really interesting. And Susan asked, was Yonya Fain art in the last display before we shut down? I feel like I saw it there.
Okay. As far as Yonya, yes, that painting actually was on display in the spring of 2019. It was in the Pushing Boundaries American art after World War II. So that painting was on display. It's a big painting. Let's see. As far as I don't recall the exhibition with Abbott and another photographer, but that sounds like something, you know, yeah. It'd be interesting to see, because for most of her Changing New York photos, there is a location, and depending upon how much development there has been, you could probably almost stand where she was, you know, to take it. So, yeah, as far as taking images of the same places that she took in the 30s, you know, almost, you know, 80 years later, 90 years later, whatever it is. All right. So, anyone else have any more questions or anything they want to know about? Or... All right. So, well, then I'm gonna sign off, and I thank you all for coming, and I hope you enjoyed this little quick glimpse of the work of Berenice Abbott.
Thank you for a very
yeah.
fascinating presentation.
Oh, glad you enjoyed it.
Thank you very much.
No problem.
Thank you for a very interesting program.
You're welcome. Glad you enjoyed it. Thank you for coming.
And thank Hofstra for making these available for us.
Hofstra has a lot of events. Most of them are free.
We're big fans of Professor DiNincenzo.
Uh-huh. Yes. Mike is great. Mike is wonderful. Yeah.
Fascinating person.
Yes, he is. He is.
Brilliant sense of humor.